The air above London fractured. Not with sound, not with light, but with a wrongness that made the pigeons scatter 3 blocks before anything visible happened. In an alley between a shuttered electronics shop and a courier service building, reality pulled apart like wet paper. The tear wasn't dramatic. No lightning, no thunder. Just a vertical slash in the fabric of space that shouldn't exist, pulsing with energy that felt nothing like magic. At least not the kind any wizard in Britain would recognize. Deep beneath Whitehall in the Department of Mysteries, an obsidian sphere began to crack. The unspeakables monitoring it barely had time to shout warnings before the sphere shattered. The experiment, a probe into unstable dimensional boundaries sanctioned by the Ministry 3 months prior, had gone catastrophically wrong. The energy it released punched through 17 floors of wards, bypassed every containment protocol, and erupted into the Muggle world above. In that London alley, the rift yawned wider. Burnedead fell through it. His first thought, such as it was that this felt different from falling. Falling had direction. This had none. His body tumbled through a space that felt like being dragged underwater and thrown from a cliff, simultaneously pressure crushing his lungs one moment and vanishing the next. He didn't scream. Screaming wouldn't help. Instead, he tucked his arms close, protected his head, and waited for whatever this was to end. It ended with concrete. Mash hit the alley floor hard enough to crack the pavement beneath him. Pain registered ribs, shoulder, knee, but nothing broken. He pushed himself up, barely winded, and took stock. Narrow space between buildings, overcast sky above, the smell of diesel and old grease. Behind him, the rift sealed itself with a sound like tearing fabric played backward, then vanished entirely. He stood there for 3 seconds, perfectly still. Then came the screaming. Mash turned. Beyond the alley mouth, a construction site sprawled across what had once been a parking lot. Scaffolding reached 4 stories high, supporting the skeletal frame of something half-built. And at the base of that scaffolding, a section had collapsed. Metal beams tangled with wooden platforms, tools scattered across cracked asphalt, and beneath it all, someone was trapped. Mash walked toward it. A woman in a hard hat ran past him, shouting into a radio. 2 men in high-visibility vests stood frozen, staring at the wreckage. One of them pointed at a section where a steel crossbeam had pinned someone's leg. "Get the crane!" the man yelled. "We need the bloody crane. It'll take 20 minutes to—" Mash reached the beam. He bent down, gripped it with both hands, and lifted. The steel groaned. 2 tons of construction-grade metal rose as easily as someone lifting a chair. Mash didn't grunt, didn't strain. He simply stood there, holding the beam at shoulder height, while the trapped worker, a young man with blood running down his face, stared up in absolute shock. "Move," Mash said. The worker didn't move. He just kept staring. "Move." Mash repeated no louder than before. Someone grabbed the injured man's arm and dragged him clear. Mash set the beam down carefully, exactly where it had been, then stepped back. Around him, construction workers had stopped moving. Phones were out. A woman across the street had her camera pointed directly at him. This, Mash thought, was probably not good. The air cracked again, different this time, sharper, like someone snapping their fingers next to his ear. 3 figures appeared in the alley he'd emerged from, wearing long robes that looked entirely out of place in modern London. 2 men and 1 woman, all carrying what looked like wooden sticks. The woman saw the crowd first. Her eyes went wide. "Oh, bloody hell," she muttered. "Perkins, get the barriers up. Stevens, start wiping. I'll handle the anomaly." The 2 men moved immediately. One raised his stick. Mash couldn't think of another word for it and muttered something under his breath. A shimmering wall appeared at the edge of the construction site, cutting it off from the street beyond. The other man approached the construction worker's stick, already moving in precise patterns. The woman approached Mash. She was older, maybe 50, with graying hair, pulled back in a severe bun. Her robes were deep purple and she held her stick, her wand. Mash corrected himself, because that's what it had to be, with the casual confidence of someone who'd used it 1,000 times. "Don't move," she said, her voice flat and professional. "Ministry of Magic. You're coming with us for questioning." Mash looked at her, then at the wand, then back at her face. "Why?" he asked. The woman blinked as if the question surprised her. "Because you just demonstrated impossible physical strength in front of 17 Muggle witnesses, triggered our dimensional monitoring systems, and appeared at the exact location of an unauthorized magical event. That's 3 violations of the International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy, plus 1 count of unregistered magical activity. So yes, you're bloody well coming with us." Behind her, the man called Stevens was moving through the crowd, touching his wand to each person's temple. Their faces went slack, confused. One by one, they lowered their phones. The cameras stopped recording. Mash watched this happen. He didn't fully understand it, but the pattern was clear enough. These people were erasing memories, making witnesses forget what they'd seen. "I didn't do magic," Mash said. The woman's expression didn't change. "You lifted 2 tons of steel with your bare hands. What else would you call it? Training." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. She glanced at her colleagues, then back at Mash. Her wand remained steady. "Training," she repeated slowly. "You're telling me you achieved that through physical exercise?" "Yes. That's not possible." Mash said nothing. The woman studied him for a long moment. Behind her, Stevens had finished with the witnesses. The construction workers were wandering away, looking vaguely confused. The barriers still held shimmering and nearly invisible. "Right," the woman said finally. "You're still coming with us. Perkins, bind him." The younger man raised his wand. Incarcerus. Ropes erupted from thin air, whipping toward Mash's arms and torso. They wrapped around him once, twice, pulling tight, and immediately snapped. The frayed ends fell to the ground like cut string. Perkins stared. That shouldn't... Stronger binding, the woman ordered, her voice tighter now. "Now. Incarcerus maxima." Thicker ropes glowing faintly red shot forward. These lasted half a second longer before breaking with sharp cracks. Mash stood exactly where he'd been, unmoving, unbothered. The woman lowered her wand slightly, not dropping it, just reconsidering. "What are you?" she asked quietly. "A student," Mash said. Then, after a pause, "I was going home. Then I was here. I want to go back." The woman and Perkins exchanged glances. Stevens had rejoined them, his memory modification complete. All 3 wizards looked deeply unsettled. "We can't let you go," the woman said slowly. "Not after this. Not until we understand what you are and what just happened here. You triggered every alarm in the Department of Mysteries. You appeared through a dimensional tear, and you're demonstrating abilities that don't match any registered magical signature we have on file." "I'm not a threat," Mash said. "That's not your decision to make." The woman straightened her shoulders. "I'm Amelie Rosewood, Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes. You're being taken into ministry custody for evaluation. You can come willingly, or we can arrange for more persuasive measures." Mash considered this. he could probably leave. These people clearly relied on their wands, and their binding spells didn't work on him. But leaving would mean running, and running would mean not finding out how to get home. The woman Rosewood had mentioned a department. Departments had information. Information might include how dimensional tiers worked. "I'll come," Mash said, "but I need to know how to go back." Rosewood's expression softened slightly, though her wand remained raised. "That's above my clearance level. But if you cooperate, someone might be able to help you. Probably." It wasn't much of a promise. Mash accepted it anyway. "Okay," he said. Rosewood gestured with her wand. The air beside them rippled, and a doorway appeared, not a physical door, but a rectangular hole in space that showed a very different room on the other side. Marble floors, stone walls, torches burning in sconces despite it being midday. "Through here," Rosewood said. "And don't try anything. We have ways of dealing with uncooperative individuals." Mash walked through the doorway. The sensation was like stepping through a curtain of cold water, brief and disorienting. When he emerged on the other side, he stood in a vast hallway, lined with identical wooden doors. Wizards in robes hurried past, most not even glancing in his direction. A memo, actual paper with wings, fluttered overhead. Behind him, the 3 ministry officials emerged. The doorway closed. "This way," Rosewood said, already walking. "Holding room first, then evaluation. Try not to break anything." Mash followed. The marble floor felt solid under his feet. The torches cast strange shadows. And somewhere in this building he hoped someone knew how to open a path home. He just had to be patient. Patience, Mash had learned over countless hours of training, was simply another kind of strength. The holding room had no windows. Mash sat on a wooden bench that creaked under his weight, hands resting on his knees, and waited. The walls were stone. The door was iron-banded oak, and a single torch burned in a wall sconce, despite the room being small enough that sunlight should have reached it. Magic, probably. Everything here seemed to run on magic. He'd been waiting for 43 minutes. The door opened. 2 people entered, a thin man in lime green robes carrying a stack of parchment, and a severe-looking woman with steel-gray hair pulled into a tight bun. Both had wands holstered at their hips, visible and ready. "Mash Burnedead," the man said, consulting his parchment. No registered magical signature. No wand. No family records in any ministry database, British or international. Date of birth unknown. Place of origin unknown. Current residence unknown. He looked up, his expression a mixture of confusion and irritation. "You're a complete blank. We don't even know if that's your real name." "It is," Mash said. "Prove it." Mash said nothing. He had no identification, no documents, nothing from his world that would mean anything here. The man seemed to take his silence as confirmation of guilt. "Right. Let's try a different approach." The man gestured to the woman. "This is Interrogator Yaxley. She's going to ask you some questions using approved ministry methods. You will answer truthfully. Resistance will be noted in your file and may result in extended detention. Do you understand?" "Yes," Mash said. Yaxley stepped forward. She drew her wand slowly, deliberately, and pointed it at Mash's face. Her expression remained neutral, professional. "Legil amends," she said quietly. The world lurched. Mash felt something press against his thoughts, not physically, but like someone pushing against a door he hadn't known existed. The sensation was invasive, uncomfortable, searching. Images began to surface, unbidden. Regro's face, the forest where they lived. Cream puffs cooling on a windowsill, training in the clearing behind their house. Yaxley's eyes widened slightly. More images came faster now. Mash doing one-armed push-ups in the rain. Mash carrying water buckets up a hill. Mash's hands calloused and scarred from years of repetitive exercise. The memories were simple, unguarded. Mash didn't know how to hide them, didn't know this was something he should be hiding. The pressure withdrew abruptly. Yaxley lowered her wand, her professional mask slipping for just a moment. "He's telling the truth," she said to her colleague. "Or, at least he believes he is. His memories show no magical training, no wand use, no exposure to wizarding society whatsoever. Just physical conditioning. Extensive physical conditioning." The man frowned. "That's impossible. The strength he demonstrated requires magic." "I'm aware of what it requires," Yaxley said sharply. "I'm telling you what I saw. He has memories of an elderly man, presumably a guardian, and a home in some kind of forest. No magic. Just exercise." "Then how?" "I don't know." Yaxley turned back to Mash. "Who is the old man in your memories?" "Regro," Mash said. "He raised me." "Where?" "In the forest." "Which forest? What country?" Mash paused. He didn't know how to answer that. His forest didn't have a name. His country might not even exist here. "I don't know where I am now," he said instead. "I need to go back." The man and woman exchanged glances. The man made a note on his parchment with a quill that seemed to write by itself. "That's not possible at this time," he said. "You appeared through an unauthorized dimensional breach. Until we understand the nature of that breach and confirm you pose no threat to the wizarding community or the statute of secrecy, you'll remain in ministry custody." "How long?" Mash asked. "Indefinitely." Something shifted in Mash's posture. Not aggressive, not threatening, just a slight straightening of his spine, a fractional narrowing of his eyes. Both ministry officials noticed. Hands moved closer to wands. "I wasn't asking permission," Mash said quietly. Before either could respond, the door opened again. The man who entered was old ancient, really, with a beard that reached his waist and half-moon spectacles perched on a crooked nose. He wore robes of deep midnight blue, and despite his age, he moved with surprising ease. The torch flames seemed to brighten as he passed them. "Ah," he said pleasantly. "I do hope I'm not interrupting." The man in lime green robes stiffened. "Headmaster Dumbledore, this is a closed interrogation." "Indeed it is, Reginald. How fortuitous that I was passing by." Dumbledore's eyes, vivid blue and far too sharp for his grandfatherly appearance, shifted to Mash. "And you must be our unexpected visitor. Mash Burnedead, I believe." Mash nodded. "Wonderful. I wonder if I might have a word with young Mash here. In private, perhaps?" "Headmaster, the ministry has protocols." "Oh, I'm quite familiar with your protocols, Reginald. I helped write several of them." Dumbledore's smile never wavered, but something in his tone made the other man close his mouth. "This will only take a moment. Purely educational consultation, you understand. The boy may be of interest to Hogwarts." Yaxley spoke up. "Sir, he has no magical signature. He cannot be a candidate for—" "Cannot is such a definitive word, my dear interrogator." Dumbledore walked further into the room, studying Mash with open curiosity. "I find reality often refuses to conform to our expectations. Now then, 5 minutes. I promise to return him in the same condition I found him." It wasn't a request. The two ministry officials seemed to recognize this. Reginald gathered his parchments with visible reluctance, and Yaxley holstered her wand. They left without another word, though. Reginald shot Dumbledore a look that promised future complaints. The door closed. Dumbledore conjured a second chair from nowhere. Mash watched it simply appear fully formed and sat down with a soft sigh. That's better. Now then, Mash. May I call you Mash? Yes. Excellent. I am Albus Dumbledore, headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. I'm told you fell through a dimensional tear this morning, lifted several tons of steel with your bare hands, and resisted multiple binding spells. Quite the first impression. Mash waited. This man talked more than the others, but his questions seemed less aggressive, more curious. The Ministry is concerned, Dumbledore continued, and rightfully so. You represent an unknown variable in a system that values predictability above almost all else. They'll want to study you, contain you, perhaps even modify your memories if they decide you're too dangerous to release. I'm not dangerous, mein Jascha, Mash said. I believe you, but belief and policy are rarely aligned within these walls. Dumbledore leaned forward slightly. Tell me, Mash, what do you want? The question was simple. The answer was simpler. To go home, Mash said. To regrow. Something flickered across Dumbledore's face, approval perhaps, or recognition of an honest desire stated plainly. I thought as much. The rift that brought you here was caused by a failed experiment in the Department of Mysteries. Dimensional magic is exceptionally unstable, exceptionally dangerous, and exceptionally poorly understood. Opening another rift intentionally would require resources, research, and time that the Ministry is unlikely to invest in a single individual of no political value. Mash's hands tightened slightly on his knees. However, Dumbledore said, his tone brightening, I am not the Ministry, and I have certain resources at my disposal that they do not. I propose a bargain. What kind? You come to Hogwarts, not as a prisoner, but as a temporary guest under my protection. You'll be safe from the Ministry's more invasive investigations, and I'll personally research methods to recreate the dimensional breach that brought you here. In exchange, you simply exist. Be a student, or at least appear to be one. Learn what you can, and perhaps in time help me understand what you are. Mash considered this. The old man's offers sounded too convenient, too generous. But his eyes, those sharp blue eyes behind the spectacles, held no deception that Mash could detect. How long? Mash asked. I cannot promise a timeline. Dimensional magic is not my specialty, though I know several who might assist. Weeks, certainly. Possibly months. And if I say no, Dumbledore's expression grew more serious. Then you remain here in Ministry custody, subject to whatever experiments and interrogations they deem necessary. They will eventually release you or modify your memory to make you compliant. Neither outcome serves your goal of returning home. The choice wasn't really a choice. Mash recognized this, but at least Dumbledore was being honest about it. I'll go, Mash said, but I need a promise. Oh, that you'll actually try to send me back, not just say you will. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. Then he extended one hand across the space between them. You have my word, Mash Burnedead. I will do everything in my considerable power to return you home. Mash looked at the offered hand. In his world, with regrow, promises were simple things. You kept them or you didn't. This world seemed more complicated, full of rules and systems and people who spoke in careful phrases. But this man's hand was steady, and his eyes were clear. Mash shook it. Then we have an accord. Dumbledore stood, his joints popping softly. I'll make the necessary arrangements with the ministry. You'll be released into Hogwarts custody by this evening. In the meantime, try not to break anything else. The ministry is already quite agitated." He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the handle, and glanced back. "One more question, if I may. The legilimens, the mind magic interrogator Yaxley used. Did it hurt?" "No," Mash said. "It felt like someone pushing. And you didn't resist because you didn't know you could, or because you saw no reason to hide?" Mash thought about that. "Both." Dumbledore smiled, though there was something sad in it. "Honesty is a rare gift in my world, Mash. Guard it carefully. It makes you more vulnerable than you might think." Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Mash sat alone in the holding room again. The torch still burned. The stone walls still held no windows. But now, at least he had a direction. A temporary path that might lead home. He could be patient. Patience was just another kind of training. And if this Dumbledore broke his promise well, Mash would find another way. He always did. Somewhere above him, in offices, he couldn't see arguments were already beginning about what to do with the boy who shouldn't exist. But Mash didn't think about that. He thought about Regro alone in their house in the forest. Wondered if the old man had noticed he was gone yet. Wondered if the cream puffs had burned. He'd get back, one way or another. For now, he would wait. The carriage ride to Hogwarts took 3 hours. Mash spent most of it looking out the window at countryside that seemed familiar and foreign simultaneously. Rolling hills, yes. Trees and clouds, and the occasional farmhouse. But the colors felt slightly off the air, tasted different, and twice he saw things that definitely weren't normal. A flock of birds that glowed faintly purple, a tree that moved its branches despite there being no wind. Dumbledore had left him with a ministry escort, a tired-looking wizard named Perkins, who spent the entire journey filling out forms in triplicate and muttering about paperwork. They traveled by what Perkins called a ministry vehicle, which looked like a normal black car from the outside, but had an interior the size of a small apartment, complete with a tea service that poured itself. Magic. Everything here was magic. When the castle finally appeared on the horizon, Mash understood why they called it a school. The building sprawled across a cliff top, like something from a storybook, all towers and turrets and windows that caught the late afternoon sun. It was easily 10 times larger than any structure Mash had ever seen, possibly 20 times. "First time seeing Hogwarts?" Perkins asked, glancing up from his forms. "Yes. Most students arrive by train start of term. You're getting the express treatment." He didn't sound pleased about this. "Headmaster's orders. Straight to the castle, straight to sorting, no fuss. Lucky you." Mash wasn't sure luck had anything to do with it. The carriage stopped at a side entrance, away from what Perkins called the main hall where the little blighters gather. 2 people waited there. Dumbledore, still in his midnight blue robes, and a severe-looking woman in emerald green, with her hair pulled back so tightly it seemed painful. "Ah, excellent timing," Dumbledore said as Mash stepped out. "Deputy Headmistress McGonagall, may I present Mash Burnedead. Mash, this is Professor McGonagall. She teaches transfiguration and manages much of Hogwarts' day-to-day operations." McGonagall looked Mash up and down with the expression of someone evaluating a particularly complicated equation. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Headmaster, I must protest again. Taking in a student mid-year with no magical background, no documentation, and no verification of his claims. All noted in your earlier correspondence, Minerva. Multiple times, in fact. Is highly irregular and potentially dangerous. The ministry may have released him to your custody, but that doesn't mean we should simply, Professor. Dumbledore's voice remained pleasant, but something in it made McGonagall stop mid-sentence. The decision has been made. Mash will be sorted this evening and assigned quarters appropriate to his house. He is under Hogwarts' protection now, which means he is also under our care. I trust you'll ensure he's treated accordingly. McGonagall's jaw worked silently for a moment. Then she turned to Mash with a look that suggested she was filing away numerous objections for future use. Very well. Follow me, Mr. Burnedead. We'll get you sorted before dinner. Try not to break anything. The second person today who'd told him not to break things. Mash followed her inside. The castle's interior matched its exterior, vast, ancient, and thoroughly impractical. Staircases moved. Portraits talked. Suits of armor stood in alcoves, and Mash was reasonably certain one of them nodded as he passed. McGonagall led him through corridors that twisted back on themselves, up stairs that led to places they shouldn't, and past rooms that seemed to exist in defiance of basic geometry. They stopped outside two enormous wooden doors. "The Great Hall," McGonagall said. "Normally, new students are sorted in front of the entire school during the welcome feast. However, given the unusual circumstances, we'll be conducting your sorting privately. The sorting hat will determine which house you belong to based on your qualities and preferences. Do you have any questions?" "What's a house mutt?" Mash asked. McGonagall blinked. "You don't—" She cut herself off, visibly marshalling patience. "Houses are groups within the school: Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. Each has distinct characteristics and values. Gryffindor prizes bravery, Hufflepuff loyalty, Ravenclaw wisdom, and Slytherin ambition. The hat will assess where you fit best. And if I don't fit, everyone fits somewhere, Mr. Burnedead. The hat has never failed." She pushed open the doors. The Great Hall was enormous. 4 long tables ran the length of the room. Empty now, in the space between lunch and dinner. Above them, the ceiling showed open sky. Actual sky with clouds drifting past, despite this clearly being indoors. At the far end, on a raised platform, stood a smaller table where the teachers presumably sat. McGonagall led him to a stool that sat alone in the center of the room. On it rested a hat. Not a particularly impressive hat. It was brown-patched and looked like it had been sat on repeatedly over several centuries. A tear near the brim had been stitched shut with what might have been spider silk. As Mash approached, the hat twitched. "Sit," McGonagall instructed. Mash sat. The stool creaked alarmingly under his weight, but held. McGonagall lifted the hat with both hands and placed it on Mash's head. It was too large, sliding down until the brim rested just above his eyes. The world went dark. And then the hat spoke. "Well, well, well," it said, its voice dry and ancient, echoing inside Mash's skull. "What have we here? No magical core, no wizarding blood, no familiarity with our world whatsoever. You're not even supposed to be possible, young man." Mash said nothing, partly because he wasn't sure if he was supposed to respond, and partly because a talking hat was currently reading his mind. "Oh, I'm absolutely reading your mind," the hat continued cheerfully. "That's rather the point. Legitimacy woven into fabric and given purpose. Quite elegant, if I do say so myself. Now then, let's see what we're working with." The sensation was similar to what interrogator Yaxley had done, but gentler. Less invasive. The hat didn't push. It simply looked. Mash felt it sifting through his memories like someone browsing shelves in a library. Interesting. Very interesting. Raised by a single guardian in isolation. No formal education. Extensive self-discipline and physical training. A strong moral foundation built on very simple principles. Protect those weaker than you, don't abuse power, work hard. Be honest. The hat paused. And cream puffs. Quite a lot of memories involving cream puffs. Mash's face remained expressionless, but internally he wondered if the hat was judging him. I don't judge, boy. I categorize. Though I must say your single-minded focus on pastries is unusual. Another pause. Let's see. Bravery. Oh yes, plenty of that. You'll walk into danger without hesitation if someone needs protecting. Gryffindor would take you in a heartbeat. The hat seemed to consider this humming tunelessly inside Mash's head. But no, not Gryffindor. You're not glory-seeking. You don't fight for honor or recognition. You fight because someone has to, and you happen to be strong enough. That's different. More Hufflepuff, really. More memory sifting. Mash felt the hat examining the thousands of hours he'd spent training alone. The repetitive exercises, the gradual progress, the absolute refusal to quit, even when his body screamed for rest. Good grief. 10,000 fingertip push-ups. In the rain, that's not determination, that's obsession. The hat sounded genuinely impressed. Loyalty to your guardian absolute. Willingness to work hard unquestionable. Fairness and equality valued above personal advancement. Yes, I see it now. But let's check the others, shall we, ambition? Well, you want to go home. That's a goal, certainly. But not the kind of grand ambition Slytherin looks for. You're not interested in power for its own sake. In fact, you seem remarkably uninterested in power, despite possessing quite a lot of it. The hat's tone shifted, becoming almost curious. And cunning strategy, long-term planning. It laughed a dry, rustling sound. My dear boy, your approach to problems is hit it harder until it stops being a problem. Slytherin would have an aneurysm. No, definitely not Slytherin. Ravenclaw, then. Do you value knowledge learning? The hat went quiet, searching. You learn what's necessary to protect people. You study what helps you get stronger. But pure knowledge for its own sake. Abstract wisdom. No, that doesn't drive you. You're too practical, too grounded. Mash sat perfectly still. The great hall was silent around him, though he could hear McGonagall shifting her weight near the doors. So we return to Hufflepuff, the hat said finally. Loyal, hard-working, fair-minded, and unpretentious. You don't care about acclaim. You don't need recognition. You simply do what needs doing, and you do it thoroughly. That's Hufflepuff through and through. The hat paused one more time. Though I must note for the record that your memories of cream puffs are more numerous than your memories of actual people. I'm not sure what that says about you, but I felt it needed mentioning. Mash almost responded to that, then didn't. Right then. Decision made. The hat's voice rose, projecting outward, so McGonagall could hear, Hufflepuff. The hat was lifted from Mash's head. He blinked as light returned, his eyes adjusting. McGonagall stood before him, the sorting hat in her hands, her expression carefully neutral. Hufflepuff, she said, as if confirming it to herself. Very well. Your dormitory is in the basement level near the kitchens. Your head of house is Professor Sprout, who teaches herbology. I'll have one of the prefects show you to your quarters after dinner. She set the hat back on the stool, which immediately slumped as if exhausted. One more thing, Mr. Burnedead. McGonagall fixed him with a stern look. Hogwarts operates on rules and structure. You will attend classes even if you cannot perform magic. You will respect your professors and fellow students. And you will not under any circumstances use your unusual strength to intimidate or harm others. Is that understood? Yes, Mash said. Good. Dinner begins in 30 minutes. I suggest you visit the kitchens beforehand. The house elves can provide you with something to eat while you wait. Her expression softened fractionally. They're quite fond of students who appreciate their cooking. I suspect you'll get along well with them. She turned and walked toward the doors, her robe swishing. Halfway there, she paused. Despite my reservations, Mr. Burnedead, welcome to Hogwarts. I hope your time here is educational. Then she was gone, leaving Mash alone in the great hall with an exhausted sorting hat and a ceiling that showed the first stars of evening. Mash stood. The stool stopped creaking. He looked up at the enchanted sky, then around at the empty tables where hundreds of students would sit soon. This place was nothing like home, nothing like the quiet forest where Raygro waited. But it was temporary. Dumbledore had promised to help him find a way back. Mash would be patient. He would follow the rules, attend the classes, and wait for the dimensional research to bear fruit. And, if the house elves McGonagall mentioned knew how to make cream puffs well, that would make the waiting easier. He headed toward where McGonagall had gestured when she mentioned kitchens. The castle's corridors stretched before him, confusing and labyrinthine, but Mash had navigated forests with no paths at all. He could handle some stairs. Behind him, unnoticed, a portrait of a witch in a silver frame watched him go. Poor dear, she murmured to the portrait beside her, a wizard with a pointed hat. Doesn't even know what year he's walked into. 5th year's always the worst, what with all that ministry nonsense. The wizard grunted. Hufflepuff will take care of him. They always do. Let's hope so, the witch said. Something tells me that boy's going to need all the friends he can get. The portraits fell silent. The great hall waited empty and vast for the students who would fill it soon. And somewhere in the depths of the castle, Mash Burnedead discovered that house elves could in fact make excellent cream puffs. It wasn't home, but for now it would do. Mash's first week at Hogwarts passed quietly. The Hufflepuff common room was underground, round, and low-ceilinged with plants growing from every available surface. His dormitory mates, 3 5th years and 2 4th years, treated him with cautious politeness. They asked questions he couldn't answer about magic families and previous schools. After the 3rd day of one-word responses, they mostly left him alone. He attended classes he couldn't participate in. Transfiguration involved turning beetles into buttons. Mash sat at the back and watched. Charms required wand movements he couldn't replicate. Professor Flitwick suggested he observe and take notes. Potions with slightly better chopping ingredients required no magic. But Professor Snape took one look at Mash, made a sound like a deflating tire, and assigned him to clean cauldrons instead. The only class where Mash felt remotely useful was herbology. Professor Sprout. A squat woman with flyaway gray hair and dirt permanently under her fingernails handed him a pair of dragon-hide gloves and pointed at a potted plant with teeth. Venomous tentacula, she said cheerfully. Needs repotting. Don't let it bite you. The plant tried. Mash grabbed it by its main stem, held it still despite its thrashing, and transferred it to a larger pot while it hissed and snapped. Professor Sprout watched with open approval. Good grip, Burnedead. You can help with the mandrakes next week. It was the closest thing to praise he'd received from any teacher. But quiet weeks don't last at Hogwarts. On Monday of his 2nd week, Mash arrived at the Great Hall for breakfast and found pink everywhere. The woman sitting at the teacher's table wore a fuzzy pink cardigan over pink robes with a pink bow in her curled hair. She had a broad, pale face and bulging eyes that reminded Mash of a toad. As students filed in, she smiled a wide, artificial smile that never reached her eyes and sipped tea from a cup decorated with kittens. Beside Mash, a Hufflepuff girl named Susan Bones muttered under her breath. "That's her, Dolores Umbridge, the High Inquisitor." Mash had heard that title before in whispered conversations he wasn't supposed to overhear. The Ministry had appointed someone to oversee Hogwarts to ensure proper educational standards. Most students seem to consider this a bad thing. "What does a High Inquisitor do?" Mash asked. Susan looked at him like he'd asked what oxygen was. Then she remembered he was new and explained with strained patience. "She evaluates teachers, observes classes, reports back to the Ministry about everything, and she can implement educational decrees laws that let her control what happens in school. We've had 3 already this year. No student groups, no unapproved publications, and a curfew for anyone she considers suspicious." "Why?" "Because the Ministry thinks Dumbledore's lying about you-know-who coming back. They want to control the school, control the information, and make sure nobody starts panicking." Susan's voice dripped sarcasm. "It's politics. Nasty, stupid politics." Mash filed this information away. He'd been trying to avoid politics. Politics seemed complicated and didn't help him get home. But as breakfast progressed, it became clear that politics had noticed him. Umbridge stood. The great hall gradually quieted. "Good morning, students," she said, her voice high and girlish, each word clipped and precise. "I hope you're all having a delightful Monday. I have a brief announcement regarding a matter of school security." Her eyes swept the room and landed on Mash. "As you may have noticed, we have a new student joining us this year. Mash Burnedead, currently residing in Hufflepuff House." Her smile widened. "While Hogwarts prides itself on inclusivity, we must also maintain certain standards. Mr. Burnedead's presence here is irregular. He possesses no magical ability, no previous educational records, and no verifiable background." Students were staring now. Mash kept eating his toast. "Therefore, in the interest of student safety and academic integrity, I am implementing Educational Decree number 26. She pulled a scroll from her robes and unfurled it with a theatrical flourish. "Mr. Burnedead will be subject to monitoring and evaluation to ensure he poses no threat to the student body. He is prohibited from participating in any extracurricular activities, including Quidditch clubs and student organizations. Additionally, his movements within the castle will be restricted to essential areas, only dormitory, Great Hall, and assigned classrooms." She paused, letting this sink in. "These measures are temporary, of course. Once Mr. Burnedead has proven himself a responsible and compliant member of our community, restrictions may be lifted. Until then, I'm sure we can all appreciate the need for caution." Her smile never wavered. "Thank you for your attention. Please continue with your breakfast." She sat down. Conversation erupted across all 4 tables, but Mash noticed most of it was angry muttering, rather than agreement. At the Gryffindor table, a boy with messy black hair and glasses Harry Potter Mash had learned was glaring at Umbridge with open hostility. Susan turned to Mash, her face flushed. "That's completely unfair. She can't just—" "It's fine," Mash said. "It's not fine. She's singling you out because you're different and because Dumbledore brought you here without Ministry approval. She's making an example of you." Mash considered this. Susan was probably right. But getting angry wouldn't change anything, and Mash wasn't here to fight a ministry official. He was here to wait for Dumbledore's research to find him a way home. "I'll follow the rules," he said. Susan looked like she wanted to argue further, but Mash had already finished his toast and was standing to leave. The restrictions meant he should head straight to his first-class potions in the dungeons. No detours. He made it 3 corridors before Umbridge appeared. She stepped out from a side passage, still smiling, and blocked his path. 2 students walking behind him suddenly found reasons to turn around and leave. "Mr. Burnedead," she said sweetly, "a word if you please." Mash stopped. Up close, her perfume was overwhelming, something floral and cloying that made his nose itch. "I wanted to speak with you privately about your situation here at Hogwarts. You see, dear, I'm not unsympathetic to your predicament. Lost far from home, thrust into a world you don't understand. It must be terribly frightening." "It's not," Mash said. Her smile tightened fractionally. "Of course. How brave. But you must understand the Ministry has concerns. A young man with extraordinary physical abilities and no magical signature is unprecedented. Some might even call it dangerous. I'm not dangerous. I'm sure you believe that." She stepped closer, lowering her voice to something almost confidential. "But belief and truth are not always aligned. The Ministry has authorized me to ensure Hogwarts remains safe. That includes monitoring students who represent unknown variables. You represent a very large unknown variable, Mr. Burnedead." Mash said nothing. Umbridge studied his face, searching for some reaction. Fear, anger, compliance. She found none. "I've read the reports from your interrogation," she continued. "Legilimency revealed you have an emotional attachment to a guardian figure. An old man named Regro, living in some unspecified forest." Her tone remained sweet, but something sharp entered her eyes. "It would be unfortunate if complications arose regarding your guardianship situation. The Ministry has authority over underage wizards, and while you're not technically a wizard, you are currently residing at a magical institution. Semantics can be quite flexible when necessary." This Mash understood was a threat. She was threatening Regro. His expression didn't change. He didn't tense, didn't clench his fists, didn't give her the satisfaction of visible anger. But something must have shifted in his posture because Umbridge took a small step backward, despite herself. "I see we understand each other," she said, recovering quickly. "I'm not asking you to do anything difficult, dear boy. Simply follow the rules I've outlined. Attend your classes, stay in designated areas, don't cause disruptions, and most importantly, don't align yourself with students who might have problematic views about Ministry authority." She meant Harry Potter. Mash had seen them together, Potter and his friends clustered at the Gryffindor table, talking in low voices that stopped whenever Umbridge passed. He'd heard whispers about secret meetings, about students learning defensive magic against Ministry orders. "I'm here to learn," Mash said flatly. "That's all." "Wonderful. I'm so pleased we had this chat." Umbridge's smile returned to full brightness. "One more teensy thing. I'll need you to report to my office every Monday evening at 6. Just a brief check-in to ensure you're settling in properly. Nothing invasive, I assure you." It absolutely would be invasive. Mash recognized the pattern containment through bureaucracy. Make him accountable, make him check in, make him feel watched. Limit his freedom incrementally until he either fell in line or gave her cause to remove him entirely. But refusing would give her ammunition. So Mash nodded. "Good boy," Umbridge said, patting his arm with one pudgy hand. Her touch lingered a moment too long. fingers pressing against his bicep as if testing its solidity. "I do hope we'll be friends, Mr. Burnedead. I have so few friends at Hogwarts. It's terribly lonely being the only one willing to enforce proper standards." She walked away, her pink robe swishing, leaving Mash alone in the corridor with the smell of her perfume still hanging in the air. He stood there for 10 seconds processing. Then he continued toward potions. The week that followed established a pattern. Umbridge didn't single him out in classes that would be too obvious, but her presence was constant. She observed his herbology lesson and made notes when Professor Sprout praised his handling of a particularly vicious devil's snare. She appeared in corridors he needed to traverse, always smiling, always offering helpful suggestions about his behavior. And every Monday at 6, he sat in her office while she asked questions designed to sound caring, but which cataloged every interaction he'd had, every student he'd spoken with, every routine he'd established. Other students noticed. Some avoided him, not wanting to attract Umbridge's attention by association. Others, mostly Hufflepuffs and a few Gryffindors, made a point of sitting near him. At meals, a small act of defiance. Harry Potter did neither. He watched Mash from across the Great Hall with an expression that suggested he was trying to solve a complex equation. Mash watched him back mostly because Potter always sat with the same two people, a girl with bushy hair who read constantly, and a tall red-haired boy who always seemed to be eating. On Friday of that week, Mash discovered why Potter was watching him. He'd finished dinner early and was heading back to the Hufflepuff common room when he heard raised voices from a classroom to his left. The door was slightly ajar. Mash slowed. "Completely unreasonable. She can't just ban study groups. We have OWLs this year." "She can do whatever she wants, Hermione. She's got the ministry behind her." "Then we work around it. We have to. With the kind of defense against the dark arts teaching we're getting, which is to say none, we'll be completely unprepared if anything actually happens." "You mean when it happens? Voldemort's back and the ministry's pretending he's not. We need to be ready." Mash recognized two of the voices, Potter and the girl with bushy hair. He should keep walking. This wasn't his concern. But something made him pause. "We need someone who actually knows how to fight," another voice said, the red-haired boy. "Someone who's not going to panic when things get real." "Harry fought him," the girl Hermione said firmly. "Harry knows." "I know magic," Potter interrupted. "But that new kid, Burnedead, he lifted a steel beam like it was made of cardboard. And he doesn't even flinch when Umbridge threatens him. Did you see his face when she was talking about monitoring nothing? Completely blank." "You want to recruit him?" Hermione sounded skeptical. "Harry, we don't know anything about him." "Exactly. Which means Umbridge can't either. He's not in her system. She can't threaten his family because she doesn't know who they are. And if even half of what I've heard about him is true, it's too risky. If he's working for the ministry, he's not," Potter said with absolute certainty. "You don't look at Umbridge the way he does if you're working for her." Mash stepped away from the door. He'd heard enough. Potter wanted to recruit him for something, probably the secret meeting Susan had mentioned. Learning defensive magic without ministry approval. Preparing for a threat the ministry claimed didn't exist. It wasn't Mash's fight. He was here temporarily waiting for Dumbledore to find him a way home. Getting involved in student resistance against ministry authority would only make everything more complicated. But as he walked back to Hufflepuff common room, he thought about Umbridge's smile, about her threats toward regrow, about the way she'd touched his arm, testing, evaluating, cataloging. The ministry wanted control. Umbridge enforced that control, and students like Potter were pushing back because they believed something worse was coming. Mash reached the barrel entrance to Hufflepuff common room and tapped the rhythm an older student had taught him. The passage opened. Inside, several students sat around tables doing homework. A few looked up as he entered, then returned to their work. Normal, quiet, safe, temporary. Mash climbed the stairs to his dormitory. His trunk sat at the foot of his bed, still mostly empty. He had no books, no school supplies, no personal items except the clothes he'd arrived in. He sat on his bed and looked at his hands, calloused from years of training. Strong enough to bend steel. Useless against magic, useless against ministry politics, useless for getting home. Somewhere in this castle, Dumbledore was researching dimensional magic. That research would take time, weeks, possibly months. Until then, Mash had to wait. And while he waited, Umbridge would keep pressing. Testing his limits, looking for leverage, trying to force him into a box she could label and control. Mash lay back on his bed, staring at the ceiling. He could be patient. He could follow rules. He could sit through Monday check-ins and smile through Umbridge's false sweetness. But if she actually tried to hurt Regro, if she made that threat real instead of implied, then rules would stop mattering. For now, though, he would wait. Patience was just another kind of strength, even when that patience wore thin. The invitation came during breakfast 3 days later. A folded piece of parchment appeared beside Mash's plate, dropped there by a girl he vaguely recognized from Ravenclaw. She didn't make eye contact, just kept walking toward her own table. When Mash unfolded it, the message was brief. 7th floor, opposite the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy. Tonight, 8 o'clock. Come alone. Bring no one. No signature. Mash looked across at the Gryffindor table. Harry Potter was carefully not looking in his direction, focused intently on his eggs. The bushy-haired girl Hermione was reading a book propped against her juice pitcher. Mash folded the note and put it in his pocket. At 8 that evening, he stood on the 7th floor in front of a tapestry depicting a wizard trying to teach trolls ballet. The corridor was empty, lit by torches that cast more shadow than light. Mash waited. Footsteps approached from the left. Harry Potter rounded the corner, wand already in hand, eyes wary. Behind him came Hermione, and the red-haired boy Mash now knew was Ron Weasley. They stopped a few paces away. "You came," Harry said. "Yes." "Alone?" "Yes." Harry studied him for a moment longer, then nodded to Hermione. She stepped forward, her wand raised, but not quite pointing at Mash. "Before we go any further," she said, her tone all business, "I need to know you understand what we're about to show you. This is secret. Completely secret. If Umbridge finds out about it, everyone involved could be expelled. Possibly worse." I understand," Mash said. "Do you—" Hermione's eyes were sharp behind her determination. "Because once you see what we're doing, you'll know enough to cause serious problems for a lot of people. We need to know you won't talk. Not to Umbridge, not to the Ministry, not to anyone." Mash looked at her, then at Harry, then at Ron. 3 students breaking Ministry rules because they thought it was necessary. Preparing for something the adults refused to acknowledge. It reminded him of the kids at the Magic Academy who'd stood against the system when that system became corrupt. "I won't tell," Mash said. Just like that. Ron sounded skeptical. "No questions about what we're doing or why." "If you wanted to hurt people, you wouldn't be this careful," Mash said. "You're training, preparing. That's not dangerous." Hermione and Harry exchanged glances. Some silent communication passed between them. Then Harry lowered his wand. "All right. Follow us. And don't freak out when the door appears." Harry walked past the tapestry 3 times back and forth, his expression intensely focused. On the 3rd pass, a door materialized in the wall. just appeared solid oak with a brass handle as if it had always been there. Harry opened it. The room beyond was vast. Wooden dummies lined one wall. Shelves held books on defensive magic. Practice mats covered sections of the floor. And scattered throughout were students, maybe 20 of them, all looking toward the door with varying degrees of alarm as Mash entered. "Everyone, this is Mash Burnedead," Harry announced. "He's joining us." A blonde girl Mash recognized from Ravenclaw, Luna Lovegood, he thought waved cheerfully. Most of the others just stared. A few hands drifted toward wands. "He's not going to report us," Hermione added quickly. "We've explained the situation, and he's agreed to keep this secret." "How do we know he'll keep his word?" A dark-haired Hufflepuff boy Mash didn't know spoke up. "Umbridge has been watching him. What if this is a setup?" "It's not," Harry said firmly. "I've watched him too. He's not on her side." "But he can't even do magic. What's he going to contribute?" Hermione stepped forward, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "Harry and I have discussed this. Mash may not be able to cast spells, but he has skills that could be valuable. Practical skills. Things that could help us if we ever face real danger." "What kind of skills?" someone called out. Harry looked at Mash. "Show them. The binding thing." Mash understood what he meant. "I need someone to try to restrain me." A sixth-year Gryffindor named Dean Thomas volunteered, drawing his wand. "Incarcerus." Ropes shot toward Mash. He caught them mid-flight, yanked hard, and Dean stumbled forward as his wand was pulled from his grip. Mash released the ropes and handed the wand back. The room went quiet. "That's impossible," someone whispered. "No," Hermione said. "It's practical. He's not countering the magic. He's countering the caster. There's a difference." Harry addressed the group, and Mash noticed he'd moved into a natural leadership position, standing where everyone could see him, voice carrying authority despite his age. "We've been learning spells. Disarming charms, shield charms, stunning spells. That's important. But what happens when someone grabs your wand arm before you can cast? What happens when you're outnumbered and surrounded? What happens when you need to get someone injured out of a fight? That's what Mash can teach us," Hermione finished. "Tactics that don't require magic. Movement positioning, disarming techniques. Things that work even if your wand gets knocked away." The students looked uncertain. This clearly wasn't what they'd expected when they'd signed up to learn defensive magic. But none of them left. A small Asian girl raised her hand tentatively. "Will it actually help? Against you-know-who? Or Death Eaters? Or real threats?" Mash spoke for the first time since entering the room. "If someone's trying to kill you and you drop your wand, you don't give up. You keep fighting. That's what I can show you." Harry nodded. "Right, so here's how this works. We'll split practice time. Half the session we work on spells like we've been doing. The other half, Mash teaches close quarters tactics. Everyone participates in both. No exceptions." Ron leaned over to Hermione and muttered not quite quietly enough. "You sure about this? I mean, he's built like a brick wall, but most of us aren't exactly athlete material." "That's why it's useful," Hermione whispered back. "He's teaching technique, not relying on strength. Pay attention." The first session was chaotic. Mash tried to explain how to break a grip, how to step into someone's reach to avoid a strike, how to use an opponent's momentum against them. The students were clumsy, uncertain, unused to physical confrontation. More than one person ended up on the mat harder than intended. But they learned. Slowly. A Hufflepuff named Ernie Macmillan figured out how to pivot when grabbed and slip free. Neville Longbottom, a round-faced boy who seemed terrified of everything, managed to disarm Ron by grabbing his wrist at exactly the right angle. Luna Lovegood treated the entire thing like an interesting dance and somehow ended up being surprisingly good at not being where attacks were aimed. Harry worked with MASH, directly asking questions, testing techniques, trying to understand the principles. So you're saying don't try to overpower them. Use their own force. Yes, if someone pushes pull, if they pull push. They're already committed to that direction. And if they're stronger than you, then don't fight strength against strength. Go for the wand. Without the wand, they're just a person. Harry practiced this against a training dummy, grabbing at where a wand hand would be stepping inside the reach of an imaginary spell. His movements were quick, economical. MASH could see the combat instinct there. This was someone who'd actually fought before, not just practiced. Hermione approached after watching this exchange. You've done this for real, haven't you? Fought people who were trying to hurt you. Yes, MASH said. How old were you when it started? Young. She studied him with an expression that was part sympathy, part analytical assessment. That's why you don't react when Umbridge threatens you. You've dealt with worse. MASH didn't confirm or deny this. Hermione seemed to take his silence as answer enough. We're grateful, she said quietly, for this. For taking the risk. If Umbridge finds out you're here, she won't, MASH said. You can't know that. We're being careful, but there are 23 people in this room now. 23 chances for someone to slip up. Then we'll be more careful. The session lasted 2 hours. By the end, most students could execute a basic wrist lock and knew which direction to move to get out of a grab. Not perfect, not combat ready, but better than they'd been. As the group dispersed in small clusters, spacing out their departures to avoid suspicion, Harry pulled MASH aside. Thank you for this. Really. I know it puts you in Umbridge's crosshairs even more than you already were. It's fine, MASH said. It's not fine. She's going to make your life hell if she finds out. But Harry's expression hardened. Someone needs to prepare these people for what's coming. The Ministry won't. The school can't with Umbridge watching. So it's on us. MASH understood that weight. The responsibility of protecting people who couldn't protect themselves yet. He'd felt it before with weaker students at his own academy. One question, Harry said. Why did you agree to help? You're not part of this world. You don't have a stake in what happens here. MASH thought about that. About Umbridge's threats toward regrow. About students being punished for trying to defend themselves. About systems that valued control over safety. Bullies are bullies, he said finally. Doesn't matter what world. Harry's expression shifted surprise, then recognition, then something like respect. Yeah, exactly. They left the room separately. MASH waited 5 minutes after Harry departed, then opened the door to find it led back to a normal corridor. The vast training space was gone, replaced by empty stone and silence. He walked back toward Hufflepuff Common Room, taking a route that avoided the main corridors. The castle was quiet, most students already in their dormitories. He passed a few prefects on patrol who nodded but didn't stop him. MASH was 3 turns from the basement entrance when he heard it. Voices. Coming from a classroom ahead, the door slightly open. Saw him on the 7th floor. After hours. Are you certain it was Burnedead? Absolutely. Walking away from that empty corridor near the barmy tapestry. MASH stopped, pressed himself against the wall. Interesting. That was Umbridge's voice, saccharine and cold. "And you said several students had been spotted in that area recently." "Yes, Madam Undersecretary. Always late evening. Always in small groups." "Excellent work, Marigold. 20 points to Slytherin for your vigilance. You may go." Footsteps approached. Mash moved, ducking into a side passage just as a Slytherin girl emerged from the classroom. She didn't see him, too busy looking pleased with herself. When she'd gone, Mash heard Umbridge's voice again, speaking to someone else still in the room. "Place additional monitoring on that corridor. If students are gathering somewhere, I want to know where and when. And increase surveillance on Mr. Burnedead specifically. He's becoming associated with the wrong element." "Yes, Madam Undersecretary." Mash waited until the voices faded before continuing to Hufflepuff common room. His mind worked through the implications. Umbridge knew students were gathering. She didn't know where yet. The room of requirements magic must hide it somehow, but she was looking. And she was specifically watching him now. The training sessions would have to be even more careful. Varied times, varied routes, counter-surveillance measures. They needed to assume every corridor had eyes. Mash reached the barrel entrance and tapped the rhythm. Inside the common room was nearly empty, just 2 7th years studying by the fire. They glanced up, then back to their books. He climbed to his dormitory. His roommates were already asleep. Mash changed into the plain clothes the house elves had provided. Hogwarts didn't have uniforms that fit him properly, and lay on his bed. The training had gone well. Students were learning. Harry's group was preparing for something real, even if they didn't fully understand what yet. But Umbridge was closing in. The net was tightening. Mash stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in this castle, Dumbledore was researching dimensional magic. That research felt very far away right now, distant and theoretical, compared to the immediate problem of students who needed training and a ministry official who wanted control. He could stop attending the sessions. That would remove Umbridge's ammunition, keep him out of whatever conflict was building. But then, he thought about Neville's face when he'd successfully disarmed Ron. About Hermione's determination to prepare her friends for real danger. About Harry's quiet weight of responsibility. Bullies were bullies, and Mash had never been good at standing aside when people needed help. He'd be more careful. Watch for surveillance vary his patterns, give Umbridge nothing concrete to act on. But he'd keep teaching, at least until Dumbledore found him a way home, or until the situation forced a different choice. The attack came during the 3rd week of training. Mash was walking back from the library, one of the few places Umbridge's restrictions still allowed him to visit, when the corridor ahead simply stopped being empty. 3 figures in dark robes appeared from nowhere, the air crackling with the same sound he'd heard when ministry officials first transported him to Hogwarts. Apparition, he'd learned it was called. Magical teleportation. The figures wore masks, silver, expressionless, covering their entire faces. Their wands were already drawn. Mash stopped walking. Behind him, footsteps retreated rapidly, other students fleeing. Smart. Mash Burnedead. The center figure's voice was male, educated, cold. "You're going to come with us." Quietly. "No," Mash said. "That wasn't a request." The speaker raised his wand. "Petrificus totalus." Mash moved. The spell shot past where he'd been standing and shattered a suit of armor behind him. He was already closing distance, crossing the 10 feet between them in 2 strides. The masked figure tried to step back and cast again. Mash grabbed his wand arm, twisted, and the wand clattered to the floor. A fist to the solar plexus folded the man in half. The other 2 reacted. "Stupefy." Red light flashed. Mash dropped, rolled, came up beside a stone column, The spell cracked into the pillars, sending chips flying. "Don't damage him," the third one hissed. "Master wants him intact for questioning." Mash processed that. They weren't trying to kill him. That gave him an advantage. He grabbed the fallen wand at his feet and threw it like a dart. It struck the second Death Eater in the throat, not lethal, but painful enough to disrupt whatever spell he'd been casting. The man gagged, stumbled. The third Death Eater's wand movements were already in motion. Impedimenta. The spell hit. Mash felt it like walking into a wall of thick honey, his movements suddenly dragging slow. The Death Eater pressed the advantage. Incarceris Maxima. Glowing ropes erupted from thin air thicker than the ones ministry officials had used, wrapped around Mash's torso and arms. They pulled taut, binding him. The impediment jinx made it impossible to break them quickly. His strength was still there, but moving felt like pushing through mud. The first Death Eater recovered wheezing and picked up his wand. "Hold him. I need to. Expelliarmus." The shout came from down the corridor. The first Death Eater's wand flew from his hand. Harry Potter emerged from a side passage flanked by Ron and Hermione. All three had wands raised. "Students," the third Death Eater said with evident distaste, "this doesn't concern you. Leave." "Really not going to happen," Ron said. The Death Eaters shifted formation, now facing two threats. The one who'd been hit in the throat still hadn't fully recovered. The odds had changed. "Stupefy." Hermione's spell shot forward. The third Death Eater deflected it with a casual flick of his wand. "Foolish children. Expulso." The explosion spell hit the floor between them. Stone erupted upward, forcing Harry and his friends to scatter. The Death Eaters used the distraction, the air crackled again, and two of them vanished. The third one remained wand pointed at Mash's head. His voice was perfectly calm. "I'll make this simple. Potter, drop your wand, or your friend dies. Avada Kedavra requires no incantation, and I can speak faster than you can cast." Harry's wand lowered slightly. Not much, but enough to show hesitation. "Harry, don't," Hermione started. "Legilimens," the Death Eater said, his wand still pointed at Mash, but his spell directed elsewhere. The sensation was different from Interrogator Yaxley's careful probing or the Sorting Hat's gentle examination. This was violent, forceful ripping through Mash's thoughts, like someone tearing pages from a book. Images flashed Regro's face, the forest house training in the clearing. The Death Eater wasn't reading, he was stealing. Then the pressure vanished. The Death Eater stepped back. "Excellent. Everything we need." He looked at Harry. "Tell Dumbledore if he wants his anomaly back, he'll find him at the Ministry, Department of Mysteries. We'll be waiting." Before anyone could react, he disapparated. The ropes binding Mash dissolved. The corridor went silent except for the sound of Harry, Ron, and Hermione breathing hard. Mash stood slowly, the impediment jinx fading. His mind felt violated, exposed. "Are you all right?" Hermione asked, already moving toward him, with her wand raised for diagnostic spells. "Yes," Mash said, though that wasn't entirely true. Harry was staring at where the Death Eater had vanished, his expression dark. That was a trap. They wanted to be seen, wanted us to follow. "It's always a trap with them," Ron muttered. "Remember the graveyard?" "But why Mash?" Hermione's wand was tracing patterns in the air around him, checking for curses. What could they possibly want with someone who doesn't have magic? Mash knew the answer. Regrow. They all looked at him. "My guardian," he explained. "They read my memories, saw where he lives. What he looks like. His hands clenched. They're going to use him as bait. How would they even get to him? Ron asked. You said you're from somewhere else entirely. A different, what did Dumbledore call it, dimension. They have the memories now, Hermione said slowly, understanding dawning. Location, appearance, context. If they can access the same rift technology that brought Mash here. She looked at Mash. Would your guardian be able to defend himself? Mash thought about Regrow. Old, kind patient. Completely powerless against magic. No, he said quietly. Harry's jaw set. Then we go to Dumbledore, tell him what happened. He'll know what to do. But even as Harry said it, Mash could see the doubt in his expression. Dumbledore would be cautious, methodical. Would want to plan to prepare to minimize risks. By the time any official response was organized, the trap would have already sprung, and Regrow would be the bait inside it. We should report this, Hermione said, though her tone suggested she already knew Mash wouldn't wait for official channels. You should, Mash agreed. I'm going to the Ministry. That's exactly what they want. I know. Harry stepped forward. Then we're coming with you. No, Mash said. Not up for debate. Harry's voice carried the same quiet certainty he used when teaching DA sessions. You don't know the Ministry layout. You don't know how to get to the Department of Mysteries. And you definitely don't know what you'll be walking into. We do. Harry, Hermione started. He's right, Ron interrupted. Remember last year, the dreams? This feels the same. Bait designed to lure someone into a trap. The only difference is this time it's Mash instead of Harry. Which is exactly why we shouldn't. Hermione. Harry's tone was gentle but firm. If it was one of our families, would you wait for permission? She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them with resignation. No. But I'd at least tell someone where we were going. Leave a message with someone we trust. Luna, Ron suggested. She won't panic and she'll get word to Dumbledore if we're not back by morning. They were planning this like it was already decided. Mash watched the three of them coordinate with the ease of people who'd done this before, worked out contingencies, covered angles, prepared for worst cases. They'd been in actual danger together, multiple times based on the references to graveyards and dreams. You don't have to come, Mash said. This isn't your fight. Harry looked at him like he'd said something incomprehensible. You're part of the DA. That makes it our fight. Besides, his expression hardened. Death Eaters in the Ministry means Voldemort's making a move. We were going to end up there eventually anyway. We should get supplies, Hermione said, already mentally cataloging necessities. Healing potions from the Room of Requirement stores. The Marauder's map so we can navigate without being seen. And we need to leave within the hour before Umbridge's patrol schedule puts prefects on this corridor. How are we getting to London? Ron asked. Flu network, Harry said. The common room fireplace connects to the network after hours. We can use it to reach the Ministry atrium. That's breaking about 12 school rules, Hermione pointed out. 13, actually, Ron said. You're forgetting the one about unauthorized flu travel. I was trying not to think about it. They moved quickly after that. Harry retrieved something called the Marauder's map from his dormitory, a piece of parchment that showed the entire castle and every person in it. Hermione gathered supplies from the Room of Requirement, moving with practiced efficiency. Ron stood watch, checking the map for approaching teachers or prefects. Mash waited with them, still processing what had happened. These students, 15 and 16 years old, still in school, were preparing to walk into a trap because one of their own needed help. No hesitation. No demands for payment or favor. Just immediate practical assistance. It reminded him of the best people at his own academy. The ones who'd stood against corruption even when it cost them. Luna Lovegood appeared as they were preparing to leave. She listened to Harry's explanation with her usual dreamy expression, then nodded. "I'll tell Professor McGonagall at dawn if you're not back. But you will be back, so it won't matter." "How do you know?" Ron asked. "Because you're very good at not dying. You've practiced quite a lot." She handed Harry a small vial of clear liquid. "Felix Felicis, I've been saving it. You might need luck more than I do tonight." Harry stared at the liquid luck potion. "Luna, this is useful. Take it." She smiled at Mash. "Don't let the Nargles distract you. They're quite thick in the Ministry this time of year." Then she drifted away, humming something tuneless. "Did she just give us Felix Felicis?" Ron whispered. "Do you know how rare that is?" "We're not using it unless things get truly desperate," Hermione said firmly. "The side effects are worth it if we're about to die," Harry finished. He pocketed the vial carefully. They gathered at the Gryffindor common room fireplace. The room was empty, the rest of the house already asleep. Harry pulled out a small pouch of flu powder Hermione had explained and threw a handful into the flames. They turned green. "Department of Mysteries, Ministry of Magic," Harry said clearly, stepping into the fireplace. The flames swallowed him. One moment he was there, the next, he was gone. Ron went next, then Hermione. Each time the green flames consumed them, without apparent harm. Mash stepped into the fire. The sensation was like being sucked through a tube spinning wildly, glimpses of other fireplaces flashing past. Then he was stumbling out into a vast dark hall. The Ministry atrium at night was nothing like the busy governmental building he'd been interrogated in. The space was cavernous and empty, lit only by a few enchanted torches that cast long shadows. The fountain at the center depicting a wizard witch centaur goblin and house elf looked ominous in the dim light. Harry, Ron, and Hermione were already there, wands drawn. Harry consulted the Marauder's map, though it only showed parts of the Ministry. "Department of Mysteries is on level 9, he said quietly. "We take the lifts down. Stay close, stay quiet. If we run into anyone official..." "We run," Ron finished. They moved toward the golden grills that marked the lift entrances. The Ministry felt wrong at night. Too quiet, too empty, like a stage set waiting for actors. Their footsteps echoed on polished floors. The lift descended with a rattling clank. Level 9. The doors opened to a corridor that ended in a plain black door. No handle, no keyhole, just smooth black wood. Harry pushed it. The door swung open silently. Beyond lay a circular room with 12 identical doors around its perimeter. As soon as they all stepped inside, the room began to spin. The doors blurred together, rotating until it was impossible to tell which was which. "This is new," Ron said nervously. The room stopped spinning. All 12 doors looked exactly the same. "Pick one," Hermione whispered. Harry chose the door directly ahead. It opened into a long, dimly lit chamber, filled with rows upon rows of shelves. On those shelves sat thousands of small, dusty glass spheres. Prophecies, Mash realized. This was the Hall of Prophecy. And somewhere in here, Death Eaters were waiting. Harry held up a hand for silence. They moved forward between the shelves, wands raised footsteps muffled by centuries of accumulated dust. Then Mash heard it, a voice echoing from deeper in the chamber. "We're waiting, boy. Bring your friends. Bring your anomaly. We have all night." It was a trap, and they'd walked right into it. The Death Eaters emerged from between the shelves like shadows given form. 6 of them spread across the narrow aisles of the Hall of Prophecy. Their silver masks caught the dim light, reflecting it back in cold, emotionless gleams. Wands were already raised, already aimed. Potter. The tallest one said, his voice smooth and aristocratic. How predictable. Charging in to save someone without thinking. Your father had the same flaw. Harry's wand remained steady. Where's the old man regrow? Safe, for now. The Death Eater gestured lazily with his wand. Surrender the anomaly, your muscle-bound friend there, and perhaps we'll discuss terms. Not happening, Ron said. The Death Eater sighed. Youth, so tediously noble. He raised his wand higher. Very well. Stupefy. Red light erupted from 6 wands simultaneously. Protego. Hermione's shield charm flared to life, a shimmering barrier that caught 3 of the stunning spells. The others forced the group to scatter, diving between shelves as glass prophecy spheres shattered around them. Mash rolled behind a support pillar. Beside him, Harry crouched low, breathing hard. Can't keep blocking forever, Harry muttered. Too many of them, too much space to cover. Then we change the space, Mash said. He grabbed the nearest shelf, solid oak, laden with centuries of prophetic glass, and pulled. The entire structure tilted, groaned, then toppled forward with a massive crash. Hundreds of prophecies shattered on impact, releasing whispers and smoke. The fallen shelf created a barrier, cutting off 3 Death Eaters from the others. Brilliant, Ron shouted from somewhere to the left. Do it again. Mash was already moving. He shoved another shelf, this one perpendicular to the first, creating an intersection of wreckage that forced the Death Eaters to navigate around obstacles instead of having clear lines of fire. Incendio. A Death Eater's fire spell set one of the fallen shelves ablaze. Smoke began to fill the chamber. That helps us more than them, Hermione called out. She was crouched behind a row of intact prophecies, wand movements rapid and precise. They need to see us to curse us. We just need to not be where they expect. A spell shattered the shelf above her head. She rolled, came up running, and fired back. Stupefy. Her spell went wide but forced a Death Eater into cover. Mash spotted movement to his right, one of the masked figures trying to flank their position. He didn't have time to warn Harry. Instead, he sprinted directly at the Death Eater, closing the distance before the man could finish his incantation. The Death Eater's eyes widened behind his mask. Cruci... Mash grabbed his wand arm mid-cast. The Cruciatus curse he'd heard Hermione mention it, one of the unforgivable ones, died unfinished. Mash twisted the arm, felt something pop, and the wand clattered away. A knee to the stomach doubled the man over. Mash down. Harry's shout came half a second before green light streaked through the space where Mash's head had been. He dropped flat. The killing curse hit the wall behind him, leaving a scorch mark on ancient stone. The Death Eater, who'd cast it, a woman, judging by her build, was already moving her wand for another attempt. Mash grabbed a fist-sized chunk of broken shelf and threw it. The wood struck her mask, cracking it. She stumbled. Harry followed up. Expelliarmus. The woman's wand flew from her hand. She dove for it, but Ron was faster. Petrificus totalis. The full body bind hit. The Death Eater went rigid and toppled like a felled tree. 2 down, Ron panted. 4 to go. The remaining Death Eaters had regrouped behind intact shelving. Spells began flying in coordinated volleys, stunning spells, cutting curses, blasting hexes. The trio and Mash were forced deeper into the hall, using the maze of prophecies for cover. They're hurting us, Hermione said, ducking as a curse sliced through the air above her, pushing us toward the back of the chamber. Why? Harry asked. Because there's no exit back there, just a dead end. Mash looked around. She was right. The shelves ended in a solid wall about 30 meters ahead. If they got pinned there, the Death Eaters could attack from a single direction with overwhelming force. We need to break their formation, Harry said. Get them separated again. Or we need higher ground, Ron suggested, pointing upward. The shelves were tall, easily 4 meters, and built sturdy enough to support the weight of thousands of glass orbs. Sturdy enough maybe for a person. Mash tested one of the shelf supports. Solid. Can you three handle them for 30 seconds? Probably not, Hermione said honestly. But we'll try. What are you planning? Distraction. Before anyone could argue, Mash began climbing. The shelves weren't designed for it, but the crossbeams provided handholds. He hauled himself up, moving quickly, despite the awkward angles. Below, Harry caught on. Keep them looking down here, stupefy, stupefy. The Death Eaters focused on the trio advancing in a tight formation. Their spells came faster now, more aggressive. One caught Ron's shield charm and broke through Ron Dove, barely avoiding it. Mash reached the top of the shelf. From up here, he could see the entire battlefield, 4 Death Eaters advancing in a wedge, Harry and his friends falling back, smoke from the burning shelves, creating a haze that made everything surreal. He picked up a heavy glass sphere, someone's forgotten prophecy, and threw it. The sphere hit the lead Death Eater square in the back. The man stumbled, turned, looked up. Mash jumped. 4 meters wasn't far. He landed on the Death Eater with his full weight driving the man into the ground. Bone cracked. The Death Eater's wand flew from nerveless fingers. The other 3 spun to face this new threat, wands rising. Confringo! Hermione's blasting curse hit the shelf beside them. Wood exploded outward, showering the Death Eaters with splinters. They scattered. Harry was already moving, circling to flank. Expelliarmus, 1 wand gone, 2 Death Eaters left. The taller one, the aristocratic voice from earlier, spoke a word Mash didn't recognize. The air between them turned thick, viscous. Mash tried to move and felt resistance, like pushing through water made of stone. Clever attempt, the Death Eater said. But you're fighting wizards, boy. We have answers for everything. He raised his wand toward Harry. Avada! Ron's spell interrupted him. Impedimenta! The Death Eater shifted his aim, deflected Ron's curse with casual ease, and returned fire. Crucio! Ron screamed and went down convulsing. Ron! Hermione sprinted toward him, wand up. Finite incantatem. The curse broke. Ron gasped, shaking. The second Death Eater, shorter, stockier, targeted Mash while he was still trapped in the slowness hex. You've caused us considerable trouble, Anomaly. The Dark Lord wants you alive, but he said nothing about undamaged. Sectum Sempra. Mash saw the spell coming, saw the wand movement, but couldn't dodge fast enough. The cutting curse slashed across his shoulder, opening a deep gash. Blood welled immediately. Pain registered. Mash ignored it. He'd trained through worse. The Death Eater prepared another cutting curse. Mash grabbed the nearest heavy object, part of a broken shelf beam, and threw it left-handed. The wood spun end over end and struck the Death Eater's wand hand. Bones crunched. The hex around Mash dissolved. He moved. The stocky Death Eater tried to retrieve his wand with his offhand. Mash reached him first, grabbed the man's robes, and threw him into the nearest intact shelf. Glass shattered. The Death Eater slumped unconscious. That left one. The tall aristocrat stood alone now, surrounded by fallen shelves and broken prophecies. His mask had cracked during the fighting, revealing a pale face and cold gray eyes. He looked at Harry, then at Mash, then at Ron and Hermione, helping each other stand. "Well fought," he said quietly. "For children." Then he raised his wand toward the ceiling and spoke clearly. "Mors Mordra." Green light erupted from his wand, punching through the ceiling and into the night sky above. The dark mark, a skull with a serpent tongue, materialized in the air, visible for miles. "Reinforcements are coming," the Death Eater said. "More than you can handle. I suggest you run." Harry's wand never wavered. "Where is Regrow?" "There is no Regrow, Potter. We needed the anomaly here in the Department of Mysteries so we could study how he arrived. The dimensional rift that brought him left traces residual energy our researchers can analyze. The old man was just bait." He smiled behind his cracked mask. "Though I must say the boy's reaction to the threat was quite illuminating. Such loyalty to a guardian. Almost human." Mash's hands clenched. The wound on his shoulder throbbed. He took a step forward. "Ah," the Death Eater said, wand shifting to point directly at Mash. "One more step, and I'll cast Fiend Fire. Cursed flame that consumes everything, including the research we need. The Dark Lord would be displeased, but better nothing than Potter having whatever you represent." "You're bluffing," Hermione said, though her voice shook. "Perhaps. Care to test it?" The Death Eater's wand began to glow orange at the tip. Heat radiated from it. A new voice cut through the tension. "I think not, Antonin." Dumbledore stepped out from behind a fallen shelf, his own wand raised. His expression was colder than Mash had ever seen it. Behind him came Professor McGonagall, wand also drawn, and 3 Aurors in dark red robes. The Death Eater. Antonin lowered his wand slightly. "Dumbledore, how dramatic. But you're too late. The mark is cast. My colleagues will arrive shortly." "They will find the department sealed," Dumbledore said calmly. "The Ministry has been alerted. Fudge himself is on his way. I suspect he'll be quite interested to see Death Eaters operating openly in his own building." For the first time, uncertainty crossed Antonin's face. "Surrender your wand," Dumbledore continued, "or I will take it from you, and I assure you that will be considerably less pleasant." Antonin looked around at the unconscious Death Eaters, at Harry, and his bloodied friends at Mash standing despite his wound at the Aurors blocking the exits. His shoulders slumped fractionally. "The Dark Lord will return," he said quietly, setting his wand on the ground. "Stronger than before. And when he does, we will be ready." Dumbledore flicked his wand. Ropes appeared from nowhere and bound Antonin tightly. "Auror Dawlish, please secure the prisoner. The others as well." The Aurors moved quickly, gathering unconscious Death Eaters and confiscating wands. McGonagall approached Harry, Ron, and Hermione, her face a mixture of fury and relief. "You could have been killed," she said, her voice tight. "All 3 of you. What possessed you to come here alone?" "They had Mash's guardian," Harry said. "We couldn't just—" "There was no guardian," Dumbledore interrupted gently. "It was a fabrication designed to lure Mash here so the Death Eaters could study the dimensional anomaly his arrival caused." "I'm sorry, Mash. Regrow was never in danger." Mash processed this. The threat had been empty. The trap had used his own loyalty against him. But he looked at Harry, Ron, and Hermione, all injured, all exhausted, all standing because they'd come to help him fight a threat that turned out to be false. They'd still come. "We need to get you all to the hospital wing," McGonagall said. She looked at Mash's shoulder wound, now soaking his shirt. That cut needs immediate attention. I'm fine, Mash said. You're bleeding through your clothes, Mr. Burnedead. You are categorically not fine. She turned to Dumbledore. Headmaster, if you can handle matters here, I'll escort these four to Madame Pomfrey. Of course, Minerva. Dumbledore's eyes found Mash. I will speak with you tomorrow once you've rested. We have much to discuss about tonight's events. The journey back through the ministry was a blur. Mash's shoulder burned. His vision swam slightly from blood loss. McGonagall supported him with magic, a levitation charm that took most of his weight while Harry helped Ron walk and Hermione insisted she was fine despite limping. They passed Minister Fudge in the atrium, surrounded by more aurors and looking both terrified and outraged. He saw them opened his mouth to speak, then seemed to think better of it as McGonagall's glare could have frozen fire. Back at Hogwarts, Madame Pomfrey descended on them like a furious mother hen. Within 10 minutes, Mash's shoulder was cleaned, sealed, and bandaged. Ron's curse damage was treated with a foul-smelling potion. Hermione's various cuts and bruises received salves. Harry, somehow the least injured, was still forced into a bed for observation. Mash lay on the hospital cot, staring at the ceiling. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind exhaustion and the dull ache of healing wounds. Regro had never been in danger. The whole thing had been manipulation, using his feelings, his loyalty, his protective instincts as weapons against him. He'd walked into it anyway. And so had 3 students who barely knew him, who'd risked expulsion and death because they considered him part of their group. Mash, Harry's voice came from the next bed over. You all right? Yes. That was insane, you know, jumping off the shelf onto that Death Eater. It worked. Barely. A pause. Thanks for coming after me when that curse almost hit. You probably saved my life. You saved mine first, in the corridor? Yeah, well, that's what friends do. Friends. Mash turned the word over in his mind. He'd had training partners before, allies, people who fought beside him against common enemies. But friends who came running into danger without hesitation, who stood between him and killing curses, who treated him like he belonged, despite being from another world entirely. That was new. Sleep. Madame Pomfrey ordered, sweeping past with an armful of bandages. All of you. There will be quite enough talking tomorrow when the headmaster wants explanations. For now, rest. Mash closed his eyes. His shoulder throbbed. His muscles ached. But underneath the pain was something else, a warmth that had nothing to do with healing magic. He'd been fighting alone for so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to have people at his back. Tomorrow would bring consequences. Umbridge's Fury Ministry investigations, probably dozens of rules about students not fighting Death Eaters in government buildings. But tonight, for the first time since arriving in this world, Mash felt like he wasn't just waiting to go home. He was part of something here. Even if only temporarily. Even if just until Dumbledore found a way to open the rift. For now, that was enough. Mash woke to arguing voices. Not in the hospital wing, he was still there, still bandaged, still sore. But beyond the closed doors in the corridor outside, 2 people were engaged in what sounded like a very polite battle. Absolutely unacceptable, Headmaster. 4 students engaged Death Eaters without authorization, without supervision, and you're treating this as some minor disciplinary matter. That was Umbridge's voice, high and clipped. I'm treating it as what it is, Dolores. Students defending themselves against unlawful assault. Rather successfully, I might add. Dumbledore sounded tired, but unmoved. They violated curfew. They used unauthorized flu travel. They entered a restricted ministry facility. They prevented Death Eaters from accessing sensitive dimensional research and captured 6 wanted criminals. I suspect the minister will take a very different view of their actions than you do. A pause. When Umbridge spoke again, her voice had gone dangerously sweet. The minister and I have already discussed appropriate consequences. Educational Decree 27 will address students who involve themselves in matters beyond their competence. Permanent expulsion for vigilante behavior. That decree hasn't been ratified yet. It will be, by this afternoon. And when it is, those 4, especially Mr. Burnedead, will be removed from Hogwarts permanently. Mash sat up. His shoulder protested, sending sharp pain down his arm. He ignored it and swung his legs off the bed. Harry was already awake in the next bed, listening intently. Their eyes met. "She's going to expel us," Harry whispered. "Yes," Mash said. "We saved lives, captured Death Eaters, and she's going to expel us anyway because it makes her look bad." "Yes." Harry's hands clenched the bedsheets. "That's not fair." "No," Mash agreed, then quieter. "But bullies don't care about fair." The door opened. Dumbledore entered alone, his expression unreadable. He looked at the 2 of them, awake, listening, and sighed. "I see subtlety is wasted on the young." He conjured 2 chairs and sat in one. "You heard." "Is she really going to expel us?" Harry asked. "She's going to try. Whether she succeeds depends largely on what happens in the next few hours." Dumbledore steepled his fingers. "The minister is currently in his office reviewing evidence from last night's incident. He's seen the captured Death Eaters. He's heard testimony from the Aurors. But he hasn't yet acknowledged the larger truth that Voldemort has returned and is actively operating through his followers. Because admitting that means admitting he was wrong," Harry said bitterly. "Precisely. And Dolores is reinforcing his denial framing last night as a student prank gone wrong rather than an actual Death Eater operation. If she can discredit you 4 before the full truth emerges, she wins." Mash stood testing his balance. The healing magic had done good work. The wound was closed, movement possible if painful. "Then we tell the truth first. To whom Mr. Burnedead the minister won't see you. The Daily Prophet won't print anything contradicting ministry policy. And most of the Wizengamot trusts Umbridge's version of events over the word of students. Then we make them see," Harry said, standing as well, "make it impossible to deny." Dumbledore's eyes glinted with something that might have been approval. "And how do you propose to do that?" "The same way we always do," Harry said. "We don't wait for permission." 20 minutes later, Mash stood in the ministry atrium beside Harry, both of them still in yesterday's blood-stained clothes. Madame Pomfrey had tried to stop them from leaving the hospital wing. McGonagall had been overruled by Dumbledore with a single meaningful look. Ron and Hermione had insisted on coming too, limping but determined. The atrium was crowded with ministry workers starting their morning shifts. The fountain bubbled peacefully. Everything looked normal, bureaucratic, safe. Until the fireplace flared green and Lucius Malfoy stepped out. He saw Harry immediately. His expression shifted from surprise to calculation to something darker. Potter. How fortuitous. His hand moved toward his wand. "I wouldn't," Dumbledore said calmly, emerging from the same fireplace behind them. "Not with 24 witnesses and Aurors on this very floor." Lucius's hand stopped. He smiled instead, cold and practiced. "Merely greeting an old acquaintance, headmaster. Though I'm surprised to see students here during school hours." Some disciplinary matter, I assume. Ministry business, Dumbledore said. We're meeting with the minister. Ah, then you'll find him rather occupied this morning. Some unpleasantness in the Department of Mysteries last night. Students trespassing, causing damage, assaulting ministry personnel. Lucius's eyes found MASH, and unauthorized individuals operating without permits. Quite the scandal. Is that the story being circulated? Hermione asked, her voice sharp. It's what happened, Miss Granger. Unless you have a different version. Lucius's smile widened. Though I can't imagine who would believe the word of children over official ministry reports. The lift doors opened. More ministry workers emerged, pausing when they saw the confrontation. Whispers started spreading. That's Harry Potter. What's he doing here? Is that the boy from yesterday? The one who can't do magic? Lucius raised his voice, playing to the growing crowd. Perhaps you'd like to explain to these good people why you broke into a secure facility and destroyed priceless prophetic records, or why you assaulted trained wizards who were simply doing their jobs. They were Death Eaters, Harry said flatly, with masks, using unforgivable curses. A convenient claim. Do you have proof? 6 prisoners in ministry holding cells, Dumbledore said, all bearing the dark mark. Criminals, certainly. But Death Eaters? Lucius made a dismissive gesture. That organization died 14 years ago. These are likely just thugs using old symbols to frighten people. The minister agrees there's no need to panic the public with talk of the Dark Lord returning. The crowd's murmurs intensified. MASH could see it working, Lucius planting doubt, making last night's events sound like overreaction. Then Hermione did something unexpected. She stepped forward and spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. If they're just criminals, why did Antonin Dolohov cast the dark mark? Why did he specifically mention Voldemort by name? Why did he say, the Dark Lord will return stronger than before? Silence. The name Voldemort hung in the air like a curse itself. People flinched. Lucius's composure cracked slightly. You're repeating the ramblings of a madman. I'm repeating testimony, Hermione said, which Professor Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall, and 3 Aurors also heard. Would you like me to provide it under Veritaserum? The crowd was listening now, really listening. Lucius saw he was losing ground. This conversation is pointless. The minister will make his decision based on facts, not teenage dramatics. He turned to leave. The fountain exploded. Not the water, the fountain itself. The golden statues shattered as green fire erupted from the floor, consuming them. The flames coalesced, twisted, and formed into a figure. Voldemort stood in the center of the ministry atrium. He was tall, impossibly thin, with skin like bleached parchment and eyes the color of fresh blood. His robes were black, his wand was pale, and when he spoke, the air itself seemed to recoil. Lucius, I see you've been managing my interests poorly. The atrium erupted into chaos. People screamed, ran for exits, dove behind desks. Aurors appeared from side corridors, wands drawn. And from the lifts came Cornelius Fudge, flanked by more Aurors and Umbridge herself. Fudge stopped dead. His face went white. No, he whispered. No, you're not. You can't be alive. Voldemort's lipless mouth stretched into something approximating a smile. Very much so, Cornelius. Did you truly believe your denials could erase reality? Umbridge grabbed Fudge's arm. Minister, we need to evacuate. Stay where you are, Dolores. Voldemort's wand moved slightly. Umbridge froze, her eyes going wide with terror. I've wanted to meet you. The woman who's been doing my work so efficiently. Discrediting Dumbledore, weakening Hogwarts, dividing the ministry. You've been quite useful." I never." Umbridge's voice came out as a squeak. "Of course you didn't. You thought you were serving your own ambition. That's what makes tools like you so valuable. You genuinely believe you're the hero." Voldemort's attention shifted to Harry. And here's the boy who lived, still interfering, still surviving. Dumbledore stepped forward, placing himself between Voldemort and the students. His wand was already raised, his expression colder than Mash had ever seen it. "Tom, I wondered when you'd reveal yourself." "Don't call me that," Voldemort hissed. "That name is dead. I am Lord Voldemort, and I have returned to claim what is mine. This ministry, this country, this world. You'll find that more difficult than anticipated." "Will I?" Voldemort gestured around the atrium. "Look at them, Dumbledore. Cowering, running, even your precious minister can barely stand. They're sheep, and sheep bow to wolves. Not all of them." Dumbledore's wand glowed blue. "Expelliarmus." Voldemort deflected it casually. "Still using that child's spell, I expected better." What followed happened too fast for Mash to fully track. Dumbledore and Voldemort dueled not the controlled exchanges he'd seen in the Department of Mysteries, but reality-warping combat. Fire erupted and was frozen midair. The floor cracked and reformed. Statues came to life, fought, and crumbled. The very space between them seemed to tear. Mash couldn't help. This was beyond anything physical strength could address. All he could do was grab Harry and pull him behind a desk as a cutting curse sliced through where they'd been standing. "We need to get people out," Hermione shouted over the noise. She was already directing ministry workers toward the fireplaces, casting shield charms to protect their retreat. Ron was helping Fudge to his feet. The minister looked broken, mumbling incoherently. Umbridge had fled entirely, her pink robes disappearing into a side corridor. An explosion rocked the atrium. Part of the ceiling collapsed. Dumbledore caught the debris with magic, held it suspended, then sent it hurling toward Voldemort. The Dark Lord shattered it with a word. "You cannot win this, Tom," Dumbledore said, breathing hard now. "Not here. Not today." "Can't I? I have nothing to lose." "You have hundreds of innocents." Voldemort's wand pointed at the fleeing workers. "Shall we test your priorities?" He was going to kill them. Mash saw the spell forming, saw Voldemort's wand beginning its movement. Dumbledore was faster. Water from the destroyed fountain rose up, formed into a massive serpent, and coiled around Voldemort. The Dark Lord snarled his spell, disrupted. "Go!" Dumbledore shouted to the Aurors. "Evacuate everyone now." The Aurors didn't need telling twice. They began apparating people out in groups, the cracks of disapparition echoing through the chamber. Voldemort broke free of the water serpent, shattering it into steam. He turned his wand on Dumbledore, his red eyes burning with fury. "You always were, sentimental old man. It will be your undoing." "Perhaps, but not today." Dumbledore's next spell was something Mash had no name for, pure golden light that seemed to contain impossible heat and pressure. Voldemort countered with darkness that absorbed light. The two forces met in the center of the atrium and screamed. Reality itself bent. Mash felt it in his bones, a wrongness that made his teeth ache and his vision blur. The battle between these two wasn't just magical, it was fundamental. Creation versus destruction. Order versus chaos. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Voldemort disapparated, the crack of his departure echoing in the sudden silence. The golden light faded. Dumbledore lowered his wand, swaying slightly. The atrium was destroyed. Rubble everywhere, fires burning the fountain reduced to twisted metal. And standing among the wreckage were witnesses, ministry workers, Aurors, and Cornelius Fudge, who'd watched everything. Fudge's voice came out cracked, broken. "He's back. He's really back." "Yes, Cornelius," Dumbledore said quietly. "He is." The aftermath took hours. Fudge was led away in a state of shock. Aurors secured the building. Reporters arrived. Somehow they always did and photographed the destruction. The Daily Prophet's photographer got a picture of Fudge's face, white and terrified. That would be on tomorrow's front page. Umbridge was found hiding in a storage closet. She tried to protest to claim she'd been investigating, but no one was listening. Her educational decrees were suspended pending review. Her position as High Inquisitor was terminated immediately. By evening, Mash sat in Dumbledore's office at Hogwarts with Harry, Ron, and Hermione. They were all exhausted, running on adrenaline fumes. "The Ministry has acknowledged Voldemort's return," Dumbledore said, looking older than he had that morning. "They have no choice now. Too many witnesses. The denials are over." "What about us?" Harry asked. "Are we expelled?" "Quite the opposite. The Minister has recommended you all for Orders of Merlin 3rd Class, though I suspect you'd rather have a good night's sleep." Dumbledore's eyes moved to Mash. "And you, Mash. We need to discuss your situation." Mash had been expecting this. "You found a way to open the rift. Not permanently. But yes, I believe I can create a temporary passage back to your world. The dimensional residue the Death Eaters were so interested in, I've been studying it myself. With their data and my research combined," he paused. "The window would be brief, minutes perhaps, and I couldn't guarantee your ability to return afterward." "When?" Mash asked. "Tomorrow evening, if you're certain." Mash thought about Regro alone in their forest house. Thought about the quiet life he'd left behind. Thought about cream puffs cooling on windowsills and training in clearings where no one watched. Then he thought about Harry, Ron, and Hermione fighting beside him, about students learning to defend themselves in the room of requirement, about Professor Sprout's approval when he handled dangerous plants, about belonging somewhere even temporarily. "I'm certain," he said. "I need to go home." Harry looked like he wanted to argue, then didn't. "We'll miss you. The training sessions won't be the same. You'll be fine. You don't need me." "Maybe not need," Hermione said quietly. "But we'd like you to stay. If you could." Mash almost smiled. "Almost. I can't. Regro's waiting." "Then we'll make tomorrow count," Ron said. "One last session. Teach us something good." "All right," Mash said. Dumbledore watched this exchange with something gentle in his expression. "Tomorrow evening, then. 7 o'clock in the room of requirement. I'll open the rift there. It's the safest location for dimensional magic." They left the office together, walking through corridors that felt familiar now. Students passed them, whispering, pointing. Word had spread about the Ministry battle, about Voldemort's return, about everything changing. But for tonight, things were quiet. For tonight, Mash could sleep without wondering if tomorrow would bring more threats, more traps, more manipulation. Tomorrow, he'd go home. Tonight, he'd rest. And in between, he'd teach his friends one more lesson about standing firm when the world tried to knock you down. It seemed like a fair trade. The room of requirement looked different for the final session. Instead of training dummies and practice mats, the space had arranged itself into something simpler, an open floor, good lighting, and enough room for 23 students to stand in formation. No weapons? No obstacles. Just people ready to learn one last thing. Mash stood at the front, his shoulders still bandaged under his shirt, but healing well. The DA members faced him, some he knew by name. Now, others just by their determination to keep showing up despite the risks. Harry stepped forward. "Before we start, we wanted to say something, all of us." He glanced back at the group, who nodded. "Thank you. For teaching us things Hogwarts doesn't. For not treating us like we couldn't handle the truth. And for standing with us when it mattered." "You stood first?" Mash said. "I just helped." "Still counts?" Harry extended his hand. Mash shook it. The grip was firm, calloused from wand work and the exercises Mash had taught. A fighter's hand, not just a wizard's. "All right," Mash said, addressing the group. "Last lesson. Most important one." He had them pair up, explained the principle simply. When you're down, when you're exhausted, when you've lost your wand and your shield is broken, and everything hurts, you don't stop. You find one more second of strength, one more step forward, one more refusal to quit. "It's not about being the strongest," he said. "It's about being the one who doesn't fall." They practiced falling, getting back up, falling again. It wasn't dramatic. No spectacular techniques, no flashy movements. Just the stubborn act of rising when your body wanted to stay down. Neville fell 7 times, got up 8. Luna treated each fall like a dance move and somehow never looked unsteady. Hermione approached it analytically, finding the most efficient way to regain her feet. Ron just got angrier each time he hit the mat, which seemed to be its own kind of fuel. After 30 minutes, they were all sweating, breathing hard, but standing. "That's it," Mash said. "That's the lesson. Everything else, the techniques, the tactics, the strategies, only matters if you remember this. You keep going." "Even when we're scared?" a Hufflepuff girl asked quietly. "Especially then." They ran through basic drills one more time. Wrist breaks, evasion steps, the proper way to fall without injury. Mash corrected postures, adjusted grips, nodded when someone finally got the timing right. At 7 o'clock, Dumbledore appeared in the doorway. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said gently, "but it's time." The students went quiet. They knew what that meant. Mash had told them yesterday, let them know he was leaving. Some had seemed relieved, like his presence had been a complication they'd tolerate but not miss. Others looked disappointed. Most just looked understanding. He didn't belong here, and they knew it. "Right then," Harry said too brightly. "Good luck with the rift. Don't trip on your way through or whatever." "I won't," Mash said. "And if you ever find a way back," Hermione added, "you know where we are." "I do." Ron clapped him on the shoulder, the uninjured one. "Thanks for not letting us die. You would have been fine." "Probably not, but I appreciate the confidence." The DA members filed out, most offering small nods or quiet goodbyes. Luna stopped to say that the Nargles would miss him, which Mash still didn't understand but accepted anyway. Neville shook his hand with surprising firmness. Then it was just Mash, Dumbledore, and the trio. "I need to prepare the ritual," Dumbledore said. "It will take approximately 10 minutes. Please make yourselves comfortable." He moved to the center of the room and began drawing symbols on the floor with his wand, glowing lines that formed a circle, then a more complex pattern within it. The air started to feel different, charged with potential. Harry sat on one of the remaining benches, Ron and Hermione joining him. Mash sat across from them. "It's weird," Ron said after a moment. "You've only been here a few weeks. Feels longer." "Dangerous weeks," Hermione pointed out. "We packed a lot into them." "Think you'll miss anything about this place?" Harry asked. Mash considered. The cream puffs? Ron laughed. Of course. The house elves will be devastated. And the training, Mash added quietly. Teaching people who want to learn. You could stay, Hermione said, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Help prepare people for what's coming. Voldemort's back, the war's starting again. We'll need every advantage. You have advantages, Mash said. You have each other. You have Dumbledore. You have the truth now so people can prepare. He paused. You don't need me. You just needed someone to show you that you were already strong enough. Quite right, Dumbledore said from where he was working. Though I would add that what you've taught these students goes beyond mere physical techniques. You've reminded them that magic is not the only form of power. That determination, loyalty, and the refusal to accept defeat have value even in a world of spells and wands. The circle on the floor was complete now, glowing with soft blue light. Symbols Mash didn't recognize pulsed around its perimeter. Dumbledore stood looking older than he had that morning. The rift will open in the center of the circle. You'll need to step through quickly. I can only maintain the passage for approximately 2 minutes. Once you cross, I won't be able to reopen it. The dimensional barriers will reseal themselves. I understand, Mash said. Your world may have progressed differently in your absence. Time doesn't always flow consistently between dimensions. You might arrive moments after you left, or days. Please be prepared for that possibility. Mash nodded. He stood, walked to the circle's edge. Wait, Harry said suddenly. He pulled something from his pocket, a small bronze coin with a DA symbol on it. Take this. It's stupid, I know, but so you remember. Mash took the coin. It was warm from Harry's pocket, solid and real. Thank you. If you ever need help, Hermione said. And if there's any way to reach us, do it. We'll come. I know, Mash said. And he did know. They'd proven that already. Dumbledore raised his wand. Are you ready? Yes. The wand moved in a complex pattern. The circle blazed brighter, and in its center, reality split. Not dramatically, no explosion, no thunder, just a quiet tearing like fabric giving way under pressure. Through the gap, Mash could see trees. His forest. The colors slightly different from Hogwarts, the air smelling of pine and earth instead of old stone and magic. Home. Go, Dumbledore said, strain showing in his voice. Quickly! Mash stepped into the circle, stepped toward the rift. Behind him, 3 students who'd become friends watched him leave. Mash! Harry called out. Mash turned. Don't let them make you soft wherever you're going. The world needs people who stand firm. It needs people like you too, Mash said. Then he stepped through the rift. The sensation was like the first time, but gentler, a pulling, a pressure, a moment of being nowhere. Then solid ground under his feet, familiar trees around him, the smell of the forest he'd grown up in. He was home. Mash turned around. The rift was already closing, shrinking to a point of blue light that winked out and left only forest. No way back. Dumbledore had been clear about that. He walked toward the house, through the trees, around the familiar bend in the path, past the stream where he used to train. Everything exactly as he'd left it. The house was small, warm, and smelled like fresh baking. Rigro looked up from the kitchen table where he'd been reading a book. The old man's eyes widened. Mash, I was just about to call you in for... He stopped, seeing something in Mash's expression. You've been gone longer than a walk to the stream. Yes, Mash said. Are you all right? Yes. Rigro studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Sit. Tell me about it while the cream puffs cool. You look like you've had quite the adventure. Mash sat. He told the story simply: the rift, the magic school, the students who'd needed help, the teachers and bureaucrats and battles. Regro listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding, his expression growing more concerned as the tale progressed. When Mash finished, Regro was quiet for a moment. You made friends, he said finally. Yes. That's good. You needed friends. I have you. I'm an old man, Mash. You need people your own age. People who understand what it's like to be young and strong and trying to figure out where you fit. Regro smiled. Though I'm glad you came back. Of course I came back, Mash said. You're here? Regro's eyes were suspiciously bright. He turned away, busying himself with the cream puffs. Well, you're home now. That's what matters. Mash reached into his pocket, felt the bronze coin Harry had given him. Solid, real. A reminder that somewhere in another world, entirely, 3 students were preparing for a war. Learning to stand firm, refusing to quit. He hoped they'd be all right. He suspected they would be. They were stubborn enough. Cream puff, Regro offered, holding out a plate. Yes, Mash said. He took one. It was perfect, crispy outside, cream, sweet and light inside, exactly the way Regro always made them. Outside, the forest was quiet and peaceful and home. Inside, an old man and his adopted son sat at a table eating pastries and not needing to say anything else. Mash was home. And far away in a castle on a cliff in another dimension, students were learning that magic wasn't the only kind of strength. That sometimes the most powerful spell was simply refusing to fall. That bullies existed everywhere, but so did people who stood against them. The Hufflepuff common room kept a tradition after that. Every new student learned basic defensive stances before they learned their first charm. Professor Sprout never explained why she required it in her biology classes, teaching students how to stand firm when handling dangerous plants. She simply demonstrated the proper stance: feet shoulder-width apart, center of gravity, low, ready to move, but stable enough to hold ground. The students who'd been there, who'd trained with Mash, recognized the stance. They taught it to the younger students without making a big deal of it. Just passing along something useful. Something that might save a life someday. And in a small house in a distant forest, a boy who'd briefly become a student at a magic school continued his training. Waking at dawn, running through clearings, pushing himself to be stronger, faster, better. Not because he was preparing for war, just because that's who he was. Someone who didn't quit. Someone who stood firm. Someone who, when people needed help, stepped forward. Even if just for a little while. Even if no one remembered his name. The important thing was that when the moment came, when someone needed protecting, when bullies needed stopping, when the world demanded someone stand in the gap, there would be people ready. People who'd learned that strength came in many forms. People who knew that the most important battle wasn't against dark lords or corrupt systems or impossible odds. It was against the voice that said, "Give up." And that was a battle anyone could win, as long as they kept getting up. One more time.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and be sure to turn on notification so you won't miss our future videos. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.